My wife came home crying, saying she accidentally cheated after getting too drunk at a company party. She said it was a terrible mistake. I later discovered she'd been planning the affair for months, had fake GPS locations, and told her affair partner my boring husband will never find out. I served divorce papers at her office Christmas party with a slideshow of all the evidence titled Her Accidental 6-Month Affair. My name is Ryan, and I'm a 34-year-old civil engineer living in Seattle with my wife Camilla, who works as a human resources manager at a mid-sized tech company. We'd been married for 7 years and together for 10, having met during our final year of college when we were both involved in student government. Our relationship had always been built on trust, communication, and shared values, and I genuinely believed we had one of the strongest marriages among our friend group. Camilla and I complemented each other perfectly. She was outgoing and social, while I was more reserved and analytical. She helped me step out of my comfort zone and try new experiences, while I provided stability and thoughtful perspective when she needed to make important decisions. We both worked demanding jobs but made time for each other, taking weekend trips, cooking together, and maintaining an active social life with friends and family. We'd talked extensively about our future together, including our plans to start a family within the next year or two. Camilla had recently been promoted to senior HR manager at her company, and had just been made a project lead on a major infrastructure development, so we felt like we were finally in the right place professionally and financially to take the next step in our lives. Our relationship wasn't perfect, no marriage is, but we'd always been committed to working through challenges together. We'd had the usual disagreements about money, household responsibilities, and time management, but we'd never had any serious trust issues or conflicts that made either of us question our commitment to each other. That's why what happened on a Friday evening in November came as such a complete shock to my system. Camilla had told me that morning that her company was having their quarterly team building event that evening, a casual happy hour at a downtown restaurant to celebrate the end of a successful project cycle. This was a routine occurrence at her company, and I'd attended several of these events over the years. They were typically low-key affairs where employees would have a few drinks, socialize with colleagues they didn't normally interact with, and then head home by 8 or 9 p.m. I was planning to spend the evening working on some project designs that were due the following week, so I told Camilla to have fun and that I'd probably be asleep by the time she got home since I had an early morning site visit scheduled for Saturday. Around 11 p.m., I heard Camilla's car in the driveway, which seemed about right for the timing of these events. But when she came through the front door, I immediately knew something was wrong. She looked disheveled, her makeup was smeared like she'd been crying, and she had the kind of nervous energy that comes from extreme anxiety or guilt. "Ryan, we need to talk," she said without even saying hello or asking about my evening. I put down my laptop and looked at her more carefully. "What's wrong? Did something happen at the party?" Camilla sat down on the couch across from me and started crying immediately. "Something terrible happened tonight, and I need to tell you about it before you hear it from someone else." My first thought was that she'd been in a car accident or that something had happened to one of her coworkers. I moved to sit beside her and put my hand on her shoulder. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together," I said. "Just tell me what happened." What she told me next completely shattered my understanding of our marriage and my trust in the person I'd loved for 10 years. "I made a horrible mistake tonight," she said through tears. "I drank too much at the party, and I ended up sleeping with someone from work. It was completely accidental, and I feel sick about it. I'm so sorry, Ryan. I never meant for anything like this to happen." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. For a moment, I couldn't process what she just told me. My wife of 7 years was confessing to an affair, but she was describing it as accidental, as if she'd spilled wine on someone's shirt or forgotten to return a phone call. "You slept with someone from work?" I repeated, trying to make sure I'd understood correctly. "It was an accident," she said again, as if this explanation made the situation less devastating. "I had way too much to drink, and things just happened. I didn't plan it or want it to happen. I love you, and I would never intentionally betray our marriage." I stood up and walked across the room, trying to process what I'd just heard. The word accidental kept ringing in my ears. How do you accidentally have sex with someone? How do you accidentally remove your clothes, accidentally go to their apartment or hotel room, accidentally engage in intimate acts with another person? "Camilla, I need you to explain to me how someone accidentally has an affair," I said, my voice surprisingly calm despite the chaos in my head. "Because I'm trying to understand how something like that just happens without any conscious decision-making involved." She looked at me with what appeared to be genuine confusion, as if she couldn't understand why I was questioning her explanation. "I was really drunk, Ryan," she said. "I wasn't thinking clearly, and before I knew it, we were kissing, and then one thing led to another. I know it sounds terrible, but it honestly felt like it was happening to someone else. I would never do something like this if I was in my right mind." "Who was it?" I asked. "Trevor from the marketing department," she admitted. "We were talking at the bar, and he was being really friendly and buying me drinks. I guess I got caught up in the attention and the alcohol, and I made a terrible mistake." Trevor. I'd met him at a few company events over the years. He was about our age, recently divorced, and had always seemed a little too interested in talking to Camilla when I was around. I'd never considered him a threat to our marriage because I trusted Camilla completely, but now I was wondering if I'd missed obvious signs of inappropriate behavior. "Where did this happen?" I continued. At his apartment, she said quietly. He offered to give me a ride home because I was too drunk to drive, but then he said he needed to stop by his place first to get something. I should have insisted that he take me straight home, but I wasn't thinking clearly. The more details Camilla provided, the less accidental her affair sounded. She'd made a series of conscious decisions: to continue drinking beyond her normal limits, to accept a ride from Trevor instead of calling me or taking an Uber, to go to his apartment instead of insisting on going straight home, and to engage in physical intimacy with him once they were alone. I need some time to process this, I told her. I can't have this conversation right now. Ryan, please don't shut me out, she pleaded. I know I made a terrible mistake, but it didn't mean anything. It was just one night of poor judgment, and it will never happen again. Can we please try to work through this together? I looked at my wife, who was asking me to forgive an affair that she'd characterized as accidental and meaningless, and I realized that I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to believe that it had truly been a moment of poor judgment that she regretted immediately. But another part of me was struggling with the illogical nature of her explanation and the feeling that there was more to the story than she was telling me. I need you to sleep in the guest room tonight, I said finally. I need space to think about this without you trying to convince me of anything right now. Camilla looked hurt by my request, but she nodded and gathered some clothes to take to the guest room. Ryan, I love you more than anything, she said before leaving the living room. This mistake doesn't change how I feel about you or our marriage. I hope you can find a way to forgive me. After she left, I sat alone in our living room trying to understand what had just happened to my marriage. The woman I'd trusted completely had just confessed to having sex with another man, but she was framing it as an unfortunate accident rather than a deliberate betrayal. I spent most of that night awake, replaying Camilla's confession and trying to make sense of her explanation. The more I thought about it, the more questions I had about the sequence of events she described. How drunk could she have been if she was coherent enough to remember the details of what happened? If she was too intoxicated to make good decisions about sex, how was she sober enough to drive to Trevor's apartment and remember everything that happened there? Why hadn't she called me when she realized she was too drunk to drive safely? But the biggest question that kept nagging at me was why Camilla had felt compelled to confess immediately. If this had truly been a drunken mistake that she regretted, why not just keep it to herself and never let it happen again? What had motivated her to come home and tell me about it right away? The next morning, Camilla tried to continue our conversation as if we were working through a minor disagreement rather than dealing with adultery. I've been thinking about what happened last night, she said over coffee, and I want you to know that I'm committed to doing whatever it takes to rebuild your trust. Maybe we should consider couples counseling, or I could look for a new job so I don't have to work with Trevor anymore. Her willingness to change jobs seemed genuine, but something about her tone felt rehearsed, as if she'd prepared these talking points in advance. Camilla, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me, I said. Has anything happened between you and Trevor before last night? No, she said immediately. Last night was the first time anything inappropriate happened between us. We're friendly at work, but it's always been completely professional until yesterday. And you're sure this was just a one-time mistake caused by drinking too much? Absolutely, she replied. Ryan, I know how this looks, but I swear to you that this was completely out of character for me. I've never cheated on you before, and I never will again. Despite my doubts about her explanation, I wanted to believe Camilla. We'd been together for 10 years, and the idea of ending our marriage over one night of poor judgment seemed extreme. I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt and try to work through the situation, but I also decided to pay closer attention to her behavior and to verify some of the details of her story. Over the next few weeks, Camilla was almost aggressively attentive and affectionate, as if she was trying to prove her commitment to our marriage through constant demonstrations of love and remorse. She bought me thoughtful gifts, cooked elaborate dinners, and suggested activities we could do together to reconnect as a couple. But there were also small things that didn't add up. When I asked about her company's policy on workplace relationships, she became defensive and said she didn't want to make this bigger than it needs to be by involving HR. When I suggested that we could attend her next company event together so I could gauge the workplace dynamic, she said it would be too awkward and that she'd prefer to handle the Trevor situation privately. Most tellingly, when I asked to see her phone to understand the timeline of that Friday evening, she said she'd deleted all her messages from that night because seeing them was too painful and reminded her of her mistake. 3 weeks after Camilla's confession, I made a decision that would change everything. I hired a private investigator to look into the circumstances of her affair and to verify whether her story was accurate. I found an investigator, David Chen, who specialized in infidelity cases and had excellent reviews for discretion and thoroughness. I explained the situation to him and asked him to investigate whether there was any evidence of ongoing communication between Camilla and Trevor, and whether there were any indications that their relationship had been going on longer than one night. In my experience, David told me, truly spontaneous affairs are relatively rare. Most infidelity involves some level of planning, ongoing communication, and escalating boundary violations over time. If your wife's story is accurate, we shouldn't find any evidence of prior contact or ongoing relationship with this man. David's investigation began with basic surveillance of Camilla's daily routine and digital forensics on her devices and accounts. What he discovered over the next 2 weeks was devastating and completely contradicted everything Camilla had told me about her accidental affair. The first major revelation was that Camilla and Trevor had been exchanging flirtatious text messages for over 4 months, not just on the night of the supposed accident. David was able to recover deleted messages from Camilla's phone that showed a clear pattern of escalating intimacy and romantic interest. In messages from August, 2 months before her confession, Camilla had texted Trevor, "I can't stop thinking about our conversation yesterday. You make me laugh in ways my husband never does." Trevor had responded, "I feel the same way. I know this is complicated, but I think we have a real connection." By September, their messages had become explicitly romantic and sexual. Camilla had written, "I keep fantasizing about what it would be like to be with you. Is that terrible?" Trevor's response, "It's not terrible. It's natural when two people have chemistry like we do. Maybe we should stop fighting it and see where this leads." The messages showed that they had been planning to spend time alone together for weeks before the company party. They had discussed meeting at Trevor's apartment, talked about how to avoid being seen together by coworkers, and even exchanged messages about birth control and safe sex. Most damning were messages from the day before the company party, where they had explicitly planned to use the event as cover for their affair. Camilla had texted, "Tomorrow night could be perfect. I can tell Ryan I'm staying late for the party, and then we can finally be together." Trevor had replied, "I've been waiting for this for months. My place is ready, and I promise to make it worth the wait." The digital evidence completely demolished Camilla's story about an accidental drunken mistake. She had been planning an affair for months, had been emotionally and sexually involved with Trevor long before the company party, and had used the event as a predetermined opportunity to consummate their relationship. But David's investigation revealed even more disturbing details about the extent of Camilla's deception. Phone records showed that Camilla had been calling Trevor during her lunch breaks for months and that they had been meeting in person regularly under the guise of work meetings that weren't on any official calendar. Credit card records revealed that Camilla had purchased new lingerie, expensive perfume, and even a new dress specifically for the night of the company party, hardly the behavior of someone who was planning to attend a casual work event and come home to her husband. Most shocking was the discovery that Camilla had been using a fake GPS location app on her phone to hide her real whereabouts when she was with Trevor. On multiple occasions when she told me she was working late or attending work events, she had actually been at Trevor's apartment. The private investigator also uncovered evidence that Camilla and Trevor had been taking weekend trips together, claiming to attend professional conferences that didn't exist. Hotel records showed that they had registered as a couple and had spent romantic weekends in Portland and Vancouver while I believed Camilla was attending HR training seminars. When David presented me with his complete report, I realized that everything about Camilla's confession had been a lie. Her affair wasn't accidental, it was a calculated, ongoing relationship that had been planned and concealed for months. Her immediate confession wasn't evidence of guilt and remorse, it was likely because she thought someone at the company party had seen them together and might tell me what had really happened. The most painful part of David's investigation was a recording he'd obtained of a conversation between Camilla and Trevor at a restaurant they'd visited during one of their secret meetings. In the recording, Camilla could be heard saying, "The best part about this is that Ryan is so trusting and clueless. He would never suspect anything, and even if he did, he's too passive to do anything about it. I can have my cake and eat it too." Trevor had responded, "What if he finds out somehow?" "He won't," Camilla had said confidently. "And even if he did, I could convince him it was just a mistake or a moment of weakness. Ryan hates confrontation, so he'd probably just try to work things out instead of leaving me. I know exactly how to handle him." Hearing my wife of 7 years describe me as clueless and passive while planning to manipulate me in case her affair was discovered was more devastating than learning about the affair itself. She hadn't just betrayed our marriage, she had been actively contemptuous of me while doing it. Armed with David's evidence, I realized that I needed to completely reconsider my response to Camilla's confession. She hadn't made a mistake, she had been living a double life for months and had only confessed when she thought she might be caught. I spent several days planning my next move. Camilla's company Christmas party was scheduled for the following weekend, and I decided that would be the perfect opportunity to reveal the truth about her accidental affair to the people who had been unknowingly complicit in her deception. I contacted the private investigator and asked him to prepare a comprehensive presentation of all the evidence he'd gathered, including the timeline of messages, the fake GPS locations, the hotel records, and the recording of Camilla and Trevor's conversation about deceiving me. I also reached out to Camilla's HR director, Janet Morrison, to request a private meeting before the Christmas party. I explained that I had information about an inappropriate workplace relationship that involved falsifying work records and using company events to facilitate an affair. Janet was initially skeptical, but when I showed her the evidence of Camilla and Trevor's relationship and their use of fake business trips and work meetings to hide their affair, she was appalled. "This is a serious violation of our company policies," Janet told me. "Using fraudulent expense reports for personal trips and creating fake work meetings to facilitate an affair could be grounds for termination. I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, and I want to assure you that we'll be taking appropriate action." Janet also agreed to let me address the Christmas party to share the information with Camilla's colleagues, many of whom had been unwittingly providing alibis for her affair by attending events where she was supposedly present. The Christmas party was held at an upscale hotel downtown, with about 60 employees and their partners in attendance. Camilla had been excited about the event for weeks, and she'd bought a new dress for the occasion. She had no idea that I knew the truth about her affair or that I was planning to expose her deception that evening. When we arrived at the party, Camilla immediately went to find Trevor, who was standing with a group of marketing department colleagues. Watching them interact while knowing the truth about their relationship was surreal. They played their roles as casual work friends perfectly, giving no indication of their months-long affair. After dinner, when the evening's program was scheduled to begin, Janet introduced me to the group as a special guest who had some important information to share with the company. I stood up in front of the room full of Camilla's colleagues and began my presentation. Good evening, everyone. I'm Ryan, Camilla's husband, and I'm here tonight to share some information about workplace relationships and the importance of honesty and integrity in professional settings. Camilla looked confused and slightly panicked, but she couldn't leave without causing a scene. I connected my laptop to the hotel's projection system and began showing David's evidence. 3 weeks ago, my wife confessed to having an accidental affair with Trevor from your marketing department, I announced. She told me it was a drunken mistake that happened once after your quarterly team event. Tonight, I'd like to share with you what actually happened. The room had gone completely silent, with people looking between me, Camilla, and Trevor with growing shock and discomfort. I showed the timeline of text messages, starting with the first flirtatious exchanges in August and progressing through months of increasingly intimate communication and explicit planning for their affair. As you can see, I continued, this wasn't an accidental encounter. This was a calculated affair that had been planned for months and involved using company events and fake business trips to hide their relationship. I showed the evidence of their fake GPS locations, their fraudulent expense reports for romantic getaways, and their use of non-existent work meetings to spend time together. The most devastating moment was when I played the recording of Camilla calling me clueless and passive while discussing how she could manipulate me if their affair was discovered. Camilla told Trevor that I was too trusting to suspect anything and too passive to do anything about it even if I found out, I said. She was confident that she could convince me it was just a mistake and that I would try to work things out instead of holding her accountable for her choices. The room was in complete shock. Colleagues who had worked with Camilla for years were seeing a side of her that they had never suspected. Several people were openly staring at her in disbelief, while others were looking at Trevor with obvious disgust. I concluded my presentation with a final slide that read, Camilla's accidental 6-month affair, a case study in deception and manipulation. Thank you all for your attention, I said. I hope this serves as a reminder that actions have consequences and that honesty and integrity matter both in professional and personal relationships. I packed up my laptop and walked out of the hotel, leaving Camilla and Trevor to face the consequences of their choices in front of their entire professional community. Update 1. It's been 4 months since the Christmas party confrontation, and the consequences for Camilla and Trevor have been more severe and far-reaching than I anticipated. What started as exposure of their affair has led to professional ruin, social isolation, and legal complications that continue to impact their lives. The immediate aftermath at the party was chaotic and devastating for both of them. According to several colleagues who reached out to me afterward, Camilla initially tried to deny the evidence I'd presented, claiming that the messages and recordings had been taken out of context or fabricated. However, when Janet, the HR director, confirmed that the company had independently verified the fraudulent expense reports and fake business trips, Camilla's denials became obviously false. Trevor attempted to minimize his role by claiming that Camilla had pursued him and that he'd been reluctant to get involved with a married colleague. This strategy backfired spectacularly when several coworkers pointed out that the text messages clearly showed him initiating many of their romantic conversations and actively planning their secret meetings. Both Camilla and Trevor were terminated from their positions within 48 hours of the party. The company's investigation revealed that they had violated multiple policies, including falsifying work records, misusing company resources for personal gain, and creating fraudulent expense reports totaling over $8,000 for their romantic getaways. More seriously, the company decided to pursue criminal charges for the fraudulent expense reports, as the amounts involved constituted felony theft under Washington state law. Both Camilla and Trevor are currently facing criminal charges that could result in jail time and significant fines. The professional consequences extended beyond their immediate terminations. Because they both worked in relatively small professional communities, Camilla in HR and Trevor in marketing, word of their fraud and affair spread quickly through their professional networks. Camilla has been unable to find new employment in HR because most companies in the Seattle area have heard about the scandal. The recording of her calling me clueless and discussing how to manipulate me has been particularly damaging to her professional reputation, as it demonstrates a fundamental lack of integrity and respect for others. Trevor has faced similar professional difficulties, with several marketing firms declining to interview him after learning about his involvement in workplace fraud and his affair with a married colleague. The personal consequences have been equally severe. Within a week of the Christmas party, I filed for divorce and moved out of our shared home. The evidence of Camilla's extensive deception and her contemptuous attitude toward me made reconciliation impossible. The divorce proceedings have been complicated by the discovery of additional financial deception. During the asset disclosure process, my attorney found evidence that Camilla had been hiding money in a separate account, apparently planning to leave me once her affair with Trevor became more serious. Bank records showed that Camilla had been slowly transferring money from our joint accounts into a personal account that I hadn't known existed. She had also taken out a credit card in her name only and had been using it to finance her affair-related expenses when she couldn't justify them as business costs. These financial discoveries added additional charges to the criminal case against Camilla, as her transfer of marital assets to hidden accounts constituted fraud and theft. The total amount of money she had misappropriated was over $15,000, which elevated the charges to felony level. But perhaps the most satisfying consequence has been the response from our mutual friends and social circle. Many people who had known us as a couple for years reached out to express their shock at Camilla's behavior and their support for me during the divorce process. Several friends told me that they had suspected something was wrong in recent months because Camilla had become secretive and had been making excuses to avoid social gatherings where I would be present. Others said that they had noticed her being unusually defensive when people asked about our marriage or our future plans. My friend Marcus, who had known both Camilla and me since college, was particularly direct in his assessment. "Ryan, I always thought Camilla was a little self-centered, but I never imagined she was capable of this level of deception and cruelty. The way she talked about you in that recording shows that she never respected you or your marriage. You're better off without someone who could be so calculating and manipulative." The most unexpected support came from some of Camilla's own family members. Her sister Jessica reached out to apologize for Camilla's behavior and to express her shame about what Camilla had done to our marriage. "I don't know what happened to my sister," Jessica told me. "The person who could plan an affair for months and then lie about it being accidental isn't the woman I grew up with. Your presentation at the Christmas party was shocking, but it was also necessary. Camilla needed to face consequences for what she did, and you deserve to have the truth come out." Camilla's parents were equally supportive, telling me that they were ashamed and disappointed by their daughter's choices and that they hoped I could find happiness with someone who would treat me with the respect I deserved. The family support was particularly meaningful because it confirmed that Camilla's behavior was recognized as unacceptable even by people who loved her unconditionally. Update 2. It's now been 8 months since the Christmas party, and the long-term consequences of Camilla's accidental affair continue to unfold in ways that demonstrate the serious ramifications of deception and betrayal. The criminal case against Camilla and Trevor concluded 3 months ago with both of them accepting plea deals to avoid trial. Camilla pleaded guilty to felony theft and fraud charges and was sentenced to 18 months of supervised probation, 200 hours of community service, and full restitution of the money she had stolen from both our marital accounts and her company. Trevor received a similar sentence but was also required to pay additional fines because the court determined that he had been the primary instigator of the fraudulent business trip scheme. Both of their criminal convictions are public record, which has made their employment prospects even worse. Camilla has been forced to take a part-time retail job to pay her legal fees and restitution obligations, while Trevor moved back in with his parents and is working as a freelance consultant for significantly less money than he was making at his previous position. The divorce was finalized 4 months ago, with the court awarding me the majority of our marital assets due to Camilla's financial fraud and hidden accounts. I received the house, most of our savings, and my retirement accounts, while Camilla was left with significant debt from her legal fees and restitution obligations. The most satisfying aspect of the divorce settlement was that the court ordered Camilla to pay me alimony for 3 years, a decision that was influenced by her fraudulent transfer of marital assets and her misuse of joint funds to finance her affair. The court finds that Camilla's systematic deception and financial fraud significantly damaged the marital estate and caused substantial harm to her husband, the judge stated during the final hearing. These circumstances warrant both asset division and support payments that reflect the plaintiff's misconduct and its impact on the marriage. Camilla's attempts to rebuild her life have been largely unsuccessful. She's been unable to find professional employment in her field, her criminal record prevents her from working in positions that require financial responsibility, and her reputation in our social circle has made it difficult for her to maintain friendships or start new relationships. Several mutual friends have told me that Camilla has tried to reach out to them to share her side of the story, but most people have been unwilling to listen to her attempts to justify or minimize her behavior. "She keeps trying to say that your presentation at the Christmas party was cruel and vindictive," our friend Lauren told me. "But everyone who saw that evidence knows that you were just telling the truth about what she did. She's acting like she's the victim, but no one is buying it." Trevor's situation has been similarly difficult. His relationship with Camilla ended shortly after they were both fired, apparently because the stress of their legal troubles and unemployment made their affair less appealing when it was no longer secret and exciting. According to former colleagues who have stayed in touch with me, Trevor has tried to restart his dating life but has struggled because his criminal record and the circumstances of his affair have become widely known in his social circles. The most ironic development has been Camilla's attempts to contact me for closure and reconciliation. Over the past few months, she sent several long emails apologizing for her behavior and asking if we could meet to clear the air and end things on a better note. Her emails have consistently tried to reframe the narrative of our relationship and her affair, suggesting that we were both responsible for the problems in our marriage and that her affair was partly a response to feeling unfulfilled and unappreciated at home. "I know I made terrible mistakes," she wrote in one email, "but I hope you can understand that I was struggling with feeling invisible and taken for granted in our marriage. What I did was wrong, but it came from a place of pain and loneliness that I didn't know how to express." Even in her attempts at apology, Camilla continued to deflect responsibility and blame external circumstances for her choices to plan and execute an affair, steal money from our accounts, and lie to me for months about her behavior. I responded to her final email with a brief message: Camilla, our marriage ended because you chose to have a 6-month affair while lying to my face about it. You stole money from our accounts, committed fraud against your employer, and showed nothing but contempt for me and our relationship. There is no version of events where these choices were justified or where I bear responsibility for your decision to betray our marriage. Please don't contact me again. Meanwhile, my own life has improved dramatically since removing Camilla's deception and manipulation from my daily experience. I've been promoted at work, bought a new house in a neighborhood I love, and started dating a wonderful woman named Rachel whom I met through a hiking group. Rachel is a pediatric nurse who shares my values of honesty, integrity, and straightforward communication. When I told her about my experience with Camilla's affair and the circumstances of my divorce, her response was exactly what I needed to hear. "I'm sorry you went through such a betrayal," she said, "but I'm also impressed by how you handled it. A lot of people would have either believed her lies or handled the situation with anger and revenge. You gathered evidence, exposed the truth, and protected yourself legally and financially. That shows real strength and character." Dating Rachel has reminded me what healthy relationships actually look like. She's direct about her feelings, consistent in her behavior, and has never made me question whether she's being honest with me. The contrast with Camilla's manipulation and deception is striking and has helped me understand how much emotional energy I was wasting trying to navigate Camilla's dishonesty. Looking back on the entire experience, I'm grateful that Camilla's confession that night led me to discover the truth about her character and our marriage. If she hadn't told me about the affair, I might have continued living with someone who was actively deceiving me and planning to leave me once her other relationship became more serious. The Christmas party confrontation was one of the most difficult things I've ever done, but it was necessary to expose the truth and prevent Camilla from continuing to manipulate me and others with false narratives about her behavior. Camilla's insistence that her affair was accidental was perhaps the most insulting part of her deception. The evidence showed clearly that she had planned and executed a months-long affair while actively contemptuous of me and our marriage. Her attempt to frame this betrayal as a mistake was just another form of manipulation designed to minimize the consequences of her choices. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to refuse to accept someone else's false version of reality, even when that person is someone you love. Camilla wanted me to believe that her affair was accidental so that she could avoid taking full responsibility for betraying our marriage. By investigating the truth and exposing her lies, I protected myself from continued manipulation and gave her the consequences she deserved for her choices. The woman who came home crying about her accidental affair has spent the last 8 months dealing with the very real and permanent consequences of her calculated deception. Meanwhile, I've built a new life surrounded by people who value honesty and treat me with the respect that every person deserves in their relationships. Sometimes people show you exactly who they are through their actions, and the most important thing you can do is believe them and respond accordingly. Camilla showed me that she was someone who could lie to my face for months while stealing from me and planning to leave me. That knowledge, as painful as it was to acquire, ultimately freed me to find the honest, loving relationship I deserved.